Hi, and welcome to episode 165 of the Untethered podcast. Today we have Tera Sumpter joining us. Tera is an SLP and executive functioning specialist, founder and owner of her private practice, Seeds of Learning LLC, international presenter, author of the internationally selling book, The Seeds of Learning, and the developer and instructor of an international and online educational community. Quick disclaimer, all information, content, and material of this podcast are the opinions of the speakers and is for the informational purpose only and not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified healthcare provider. Welcome to the Untethered podcast. I am your host, Hallie. I'm a certified orofacial myologist, feeding specialist, and mentor. This podcast is all about getting your questions answered and collaborating with colleagues to bring you the most up-to-date information in the orofacial myofunctional therapy, tethered oral tissue, and airway space. I challenge you to keep an open mind and join my mission to get this information out to the masses. Let's get started. Tera, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to chat today.
Thanks so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. So excited to finally meet you. I mean, it's not live-ish, right? Yes. Thanks for having me.
It's the way things are done these days. This is how I meet everybody. I love it. It's so convenient.
It makes it easy.
We've been chatting on Instagram for like a while now. And I feel like I always see your posts and I know that we're in like two different like niches, two different specialties, but we're always on the same page, right? And I'm always like, yes, she gets it. Yes, like you are my people. And so I'm so excited that we're going to chat a bit today because
when I was on, Danny of Speech Goods, when I was on her podcast, she said afterwards, she goes, oh my gosh, you and Hallie are like two peas in a pod. And you guys have to meet. And I was like, okay, I don't know anything about oromyofacial, nothing, right? Nothing. And I was like, great, she sounds fantastic. So yeah, that's when I reached out to you. And I was like, Danny, sorry to get to know you. Hi, I'm Tera.
Hey. Like so funny, like as adults, right? I'm like the most awkward person. I'm like, hi, do you want to be my friend?
That's exactly the way it comes across. Yeah, it's like, I don't know what else to say.
I teach my 6-year-old how to go make friends, but like making my friends myself, I'm like, how do I say hi to this person?
Yeah. Hi, let's be friends.
You
seem nice. Yeah.
So speaking of which, and how to use our brains. So you're an executive functioning specialist, and I know you have your own private practice, and you've got your book, The Seeds of Learning, and we'll talk about that. And you're a developer and instructor inside of a educational community as well. So we have a lot. I haven't written a book, but otherwise, we have a lot in common, like a business front. We do have like a children's series coming out on tongue ties and like the journey of like tongue tie to myo to tongue tie release, because there's nothing out there and it's like a simple, like written for like young kids kind of series. So we're trying to finalize that. It's been in the work literally for 2 years and it shouldn't be taking this long, but hey.
No, it does. It does. It takes absolutely forever. It's a horrific process. I'm actually working on my second book right now, which is the therapy framework, the executive functioning therapy framework. And it's years. It takes forever. It's torturous. Yeah.
I thought in my brain, I was like, well, this is a kid's book and it's really, really short. So it should be fast, right? It should be fast to do, but there's all these like moving pieces that take forever outside of actually writing it and design. Like, and we've got the images, we've got the text, it's the everything else. It's taking a while.
Girl, I feel your pain. I'd be like, it's going to be out this month. No.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I really need that for one of my clients. I'm like, I'll let you know when it's out. Maybe this month. And I put it on my calendar. I'm like, what is this reminder? And I was like, oh yeah, they're still not done. I'll have to let her know. It's maybe next month.
No, it's such a painful process, but it's so worth it. It's so rewarding once it's out there, and it's a quick resource for people.
I love it. So how did you get into this space? How did you become an executive functioning specialist? Or maybe the better question is like, why? Like what brought you to that?
Oh my God. Ass backwards, like walked ass backwards, right? By the way, put explicit like an E on my, okay. You just like warn people, there might be an F-bomb that flies out. Hopefully not, but you never know. So yeah, really it was simply because there was a need. And, I was a regular old therapist, just like everybody else coming out of graduate school, and doing speech language literacy therapy. And there was something missing, right? Like there was something that, my kids were having trouble attending. They just weren't connected to me. And I could tell that was the level of the breakdown. Like the level at which they were struggling was their ability to connect to their environment and their ability to connect to me. And so that was when I really started digging. And that was probably, 14 years ago or so. And so I've spent the last, almost decade and a half doing predominantly all of my continuing education in the fields of psychology, neuropsychology, neuroscience, occupational therapy. That's a big one, because sensory regulation is really critical to being able to access the executive functioning system. So, that's a lot of years of studying something, right? And it's interesting because, you get 2 years in your graduate studies, and my undergrad was not in speech and language pathology. So I did like a post-bac year, and then I did 2 years. So I had like 3 years. But then when you think about all the years after that I've been studying, this other area, that's really where, you hone your skills.
Yeah.
I remember like the newbie clinicians, like, you don't know jack yet, just hold on, it'll be okay. Like you'll get there. You're learning. So really it was just, I sort of fell down a rabbit hole. And, when I would, you're like, yes, I understand. Yeah, like one topic that I would learn about led to another topic, led to another researcher, who led to another, therapist, who led to more researchers. And so here I am all these years later. And, over time, in terms of like lots of continuing education, but also I'm reading constantly, lots of research analysis, research synthesis, and then applying all of it to my clinical practice. That's how I got here. Slowly, surely, painfully, all that, but I'm here.
And you're like seeing me nod over here, and I'm like, oh yes, that rabbit hole. It's that thing that I didn't learn in grad school, right? They didn't teach me anything that I felt like they gave me the foundations. It was great, but it's more of a generalist type of approach. Like, let's feed you as much information in every area, because speech pathology is it's vast. Like there's so much that we do as speech pathologists. And, I'm not to downplay generalists, but if you want to specialize in something, like you're going to, in my opinion, the specialist is going to make a lot more headway usually than a generalist, just because, like you said, we spend thousands and thousands of dollars and thousands of hours, right?
Yeah.
It's not just the dollars, it's the hours, the time commitment, diving into the courses from different people, because you learn different things from different instructors and different courses and methodologies, even within a specialty, and then the research. And I love how you said you had to go into like psychology and, even the occupational, arena. And it's the same thing with the work that I do, right? Like I have to look beyond the speech pathology world. There really isn't a lot of research in tongue-tie, orofacial myology, and even feeding. Like you have to look into, like you said, we can't do feeding therapy unless the nervous system is regulated. And that requires that, that sensory system, and we can't separate the sensory system from the motor system, but everybody seems to think we can and teaches it that way. Right. So I love how, even for you were like, yeah, we have to learn about these other arenas because it's all so interconnected. It's amazing. So I guess for our listeners who are like, what the heck is executive functioning? Because that's not, obviously the topic of our podcast usually on here. Yeah. But I do think it's a really important topic for us to talk about even for the patients, the parents who listen normally, and the clinicians and other professionals who may be listening, because if there is an impairment in executive functioning skills, how is that child, what's their response to therapy going to look like? How are they going to access therapy? What do we need to do to modify the therapy to best meet them where they're at? And so I love this whole conversation of executive functioning, because people always hear me say that, like, to do traditional myo, for example, a child needs to be at a cognitive level of a 4-year-old, not age-wise, but like cognitively. And I don't think people even understand what that means, really.
I was going to say, they don't know what that means. Yeah.
Right. So, but like, what is executive functioning? Will you just kind of simplify that for our listeners?
Okay, so it's not a simple topic. So it's a really, really complex sort of umbrella terminology. And the term itself references really the prefrontal cortex functioning of the brain. And it's essentially the system of the brain that regulates all other higher level processing. So it's our self-regulatory system. We can think of it in a couple of ways. We can think of the executive functioning system as kind of like the boss. So it's the one that's in charge. So it's the one giving the commands to the other workers in the brain. So we have all these little workers, right, that do their jobs. But the boss, the executive functioning system, is going to cue the workers to do what they need to do and when and how. So it's kind of like that. I also like to think of the executive functioning system like a conductor, because it has to make sure that everybody works together, all those workers work together in this really harmonious fashion so that they're integrated. And so just like the conductor, would cue the violins and then cue the violas, right? And then he would say, no, you guys be quiet. Okay, you guys be loud, right? I don't know how to conduct, but I'm making this up, right? Pretend like I do. I play a conductor on Zoom. Okay, so, he's cueing, but he's helping all of these different workers and pieces and parts integrate. And that's a really, really important part of this, because that I feel like when people are addressing executive functioning, that's the one piece that's often missed being talked about, is the fact that we might have these workers who know how to do their job. This is really true when it comes to literacy. I know this is like way off from what you do, but when we talk about literacy, because literacy is a really large network of processing with all these different workers that have to do something. And sometimes the workers themselves look fine, but they can't integrate together. They don't talk to each other well. They don't work together well. And so, people test them and they say, well, the workers seem fine. The kids must not have a problem. And then the kids go to the classroom or go home, and then it all falls apart. And the parents are screaming, going, there's a problem. And everyone's like, nope, tested them, they're fine, right? So a lot of times when we see that, it's the problem of the conductor, right? This executive functioning system helping everybody integrate together, do what they're supposed to do and when.
Yeah. So I love how you mentioned like kind of where this may fall through the cracks, because I feel like that's a common theme, unfortunately, in our industry, of these children who, especially when it's school-based, you're kind of depending on standardized tests. And if they don't fall more than a certain percentage below, then they don't receive services. But if your executive functioning system, right, if you're not able to, whether it's organize yourself or, basically be the conductor, right, you're going to have a hard time in school. And, I've always looked at it. I think this is an interesting conversation too, because I always look at it and go, well, what's sleep like, right? Like, what is their sleep like? What's happening? And I think part of that is airway, but also part of it is what's happening during the day. What's happening? Are they regulated or dysregulated? Because you're not going to sleep great if you're dysregulated all day. You might hit the bed and crash, but the quality of your sleep is going to be impacted. And I feel like that probably also further impacts your executive functioning if your brain is not getting restorative sleep. So I'm just like, yeah, okay.
100%. Oh gosh, there's a really great researcher. Now I'm blanking on his name. I want to say it's Walker. I can Google it in a second. But he's a sleep researcher, but he talks about this. He has research that he has referenced that says that if you have less than 6 hours of sleep at night, the connection between your prefrontal cortex and the other areas of your brain is literally severed.
Are you talking about Matthew Walker? Why We Sleep?
Matthew Walker. There it is. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. His work is fantastic. I love his work. So, but yes. So he's talked about if you have less than 6 hours of sleep a night, right? This ability for the prefrontal cortex, this executive functioning system, to connect and communicate with these other areas of the brain to regulate is severed, right? And so it's why if we're not sleeping, if sleep is a huge, huge issue when it comes to learning. The other thing about sleep too, that's so important, is that when we sleep, and we get into deep sleep, right? So that REM sleep, the brain rehearses the information that was learned that day. So it replays it to better store it into long-term memory. And the other thing that happens during this REM sleep is not only does it rehearse it to sort of, make it concrete in the brain, get it to stick, but it also helps the brain make associations between information. And so connecting point A to point B. And so, this is something that's really important that and I've seen this with kiddos, kiddos who had nocturnal seizures, kiddos who just simply didn't have good sleep hygiene, they would have all kinds of learning difficulties. I mean, they could. So sleep is a big part of the puzzle.
Yeah, I once had this is making me remember an IEP meeting that I sat in. Gosh, I worked in the schools for like 3 years. So this is dating back like 2010, maybe. And this neuropsych who she ended up leaving the schools and going private, and I've worked with her since, and she's just freaking phenomenal. She actually contacts the testing companies to find out how she can modify assessments for different children without invalidating the test. I mean, it is like she'll print things larger and stick it on a wall for a kid to access that page in the the test. It's just, or she'll use it. It's just really cool to see like how she functions, and then how the kids are able to then we can access what they know because it was presented properly to them. It's pretty cool. But I just remember her sitting there basically telling a parents who had a child with a new diagnosis can't talk, of autism. And, the parents were kind of beside themselves, and the dad's going, but he's so smart. And we're going, this isn't a question of intelligence. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. It's a base. And she explained it specifically for him. It impacts how he accesses the information in his brain and how he can share with us what he knows. And so, yes, he's a very intelligent little boy, but we have to put in support so that he can learn how to communicate with us in a way that he knows. She said it's kind of like having all these different filing cabinets, and the pathway to this filing cabinet is blocked, or we can't find the key for this, cabinet, but this cabinet we've got, however, oops, the file that's supposed to go here went over there. And so when you just said that comment about like, I don't remember what you said. It was something about like, making the connections. And, it's almost like for these parents, and she explained it in such a much more beautiful way. She also used like a whole web of different, she was drawing webs and drawing all these lines and showing how his thinking is not linear. Most of our thinking is not linear, but especially for this child, it was like, definitely, it's not linear. And so she was like, for him, you say sock, and he goes, oh, there's a sock in the book about spiders. So he says, oh yeah, spiders. And you're like, no, I said sock. Like, how did you get to spiders? Right. But she said, it's actually, there's probably 10 other things that happened in that web before he got to spiders. It wasn't a direct linear connection. And for us to try and figure out his brain and how he got from point A to point B, you're never going to figure it out unless you really know that child and it's like a favorite book or something. And you go, oh yeah, in that book about spiders, like, they wear purple socks and it's like his favorite thing to talk about ever. Right. So it was just a very eye-opening, conversation, I think, for me, because I was a newer clinician then, and to hear her explain that to the parents, and for the parents to kind of go like, oh, so my child's not stupid. And I was like, oh, nobody ever said that, but that's the first thing a lot of parents think. And so I think it's like these conversations of explaining to others just how the brain thinks differently, and we need to be better about educating the world about how the brain thinks differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a right or a wrong, but it's learning about how do we interact and communicate with each other, knowing that, there aren't just 4 different types of learning. Like, it's not, like when I was growing up, it's like, oh, we teach dynamically to the 4 different types of learning. We have auditory and visual and tactile. And I'm like, no, those are senses. and they may be ways of what people, learn information as well. And like, you're the expert here. This is like very basic level knowledge in my brain. But I always, being ADHD myself, I'm like, the way I learn is very different than all of my classmates. Like in college, I didn't get the official ADHD diagnosis until I was 19. And even though at age 5, they basically told my mom that I was, and medicate me. And she's like, I'm not medicating her. And I figured myself out until about college, and then it all fell apart. So I got tested. And she's like, well, your IQ is really high, so we're not going to give you the label, but here's a Ritalin prescription. And I was like, oh yeah, that's helpful. So I took it. I hated it, but then I basically was an adult. So I was able to teach myself how to learn because I started researching it, and I was now getting into the psychology and speech world. And so I had access to different ways of learning and, studying for tests, but I would give people my notes, and it was very interesting. Number one, my notes off Ritalin versus on Ritalin, it's like a different human wrote them. For one. Number two, and I hated this stuff. I only used it for school. I refused to take it otherwise. And then number two, I would give those notes, whether it was on Ritalin or off Ritalin, I would give my notes to friends who didn't go to class, and they would use my notes and they would get an A on the test. And I was in class and I studied those notes and I wrote those notes and I rewrote those notes and I would get a C. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this is not okay. So I did teach myself how to chunk and how to do all these different types of learning tasks that worked for me. But yeah, it makes me, I think it made me really appreciate the SLP world. That's like one of the reasons why I fell into this versus like psychology. I started in business, switched to psych, and then ended up in speech. Yeah. And I thought that that's what I was going to do.
Skill set coming into the field of SLP.
Right? Yeah. I thought I was going to work with children on the spectrum. I thought I was going to work with autistic people. And I did start there. And then I started to see that a lot of them had all these feeding challenges and constipation issues, and it was interfering with our ability to do our sessions. These kids who were like, I had a kid who was just always holding his bowel movements, and he was so uncomfortable, and he would scream and cry. And his, there was an ABA therapist there too, and they were like, just let him be, just let him do his thing. And I was like, why is nobody like talking to a medical professional to see how we can help this child? Because it's obviously not the answer, and there's other things we probably can be doing. And that's eventually I fell into the world of feeding. And that brought me into TOTS and Myo, and the rest is history. But yeah, no, I was kind of like getting into that ASD space. And that was really what I loved, working with those kids, because I loved how they thought so differently. Yeah. That same child, I remember like my first session with him, I was taking him over from another therapist, and she said, he's going to say like yellow. And that means he wants you to color the train's wheels yellow. And I'm like, okay. And I sat down with him and I looked at him and I was like, this kid is holding back. Like, he can do more. They're just not expecting it out of him too. So that was like another thing too. It was like a challenge, and I loved the challenge. I was like, we are going to figure out how you communicate so you can share your voice with the world, like whatever that looks like. And I don't know, I love those kids. So, but I'm so far from that now.
I know you are so far from that. Well, I mean, yes and no. Yes, it all circles back, right? It's all connected.
Yeah. I mean, I have a private practice, so we still work with, every child with every need pretty much based on the different specialties throughout the practice. And I have a large team of therapists, but for me personally, it's like, that's usually we co-treat. I'm like, I am not the specialist in that space anymore. You don't want me for that, because I haven't done the continuing ed to keep up with that. Like, I'm not going to pretend like we can fit it all into one session. Like, no, we're going to focus on what I'm good at. And then the other person on my team will focus on what she's good at. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting listening, to you talk all that, because it all circles back to executive functioning and how important having that as a foundation for all of our learning, all of our development is. Because if we think about, when you ask like, what is executive functioning? And I gave you the easy answer of, it's the self-regulatory system, but the really complex answer is that there's a whole host of skills involved in that processing. And really the most foundational ones are perception. Are we aware of our environment? Are we perceiving our environment? Are we perceiving the objects and people in our environment? Are we perceiving ourselves, right? Can we shine the attention flashlight inwards, right? Can we shine it outwards? So perception is a huge one. Focus and attention, right? Can we direct our attention where it needs to go? And can I hold it there long enough to be able to absorb information from the environment? These are where so many of our children with speech and language disorders have breakdowns within their development. And so what ends up happening is when they're not really focused and perceiving their environment for long periods of time, then they look like their development's really choppy and really gappy and kind of all over the place. People will say, well, they can develop this, but why didn't they develop this? Well, maybe because that wasn't what they were focused to and tuned into during development, right? It's not necessarily a language issue. The symptom becomes language, right? The language disorder becomes the symptom, but the root cause of that symptom is the fact that their executive functioning system wasn't helping them perceive and focus for sustained periods so that they got, a sustained sort of, exposure to speech and language. And that's something that really bothers me. And I feel like we shame parents way too much. And it makes me bonkers. You hear so much of like, read to your kids, and which is great, right? Obviously, we need to read to our kids, we need to talk to our kids. But I feel like there's a lot of therapy coming out, you need to expose them to all the language. And it's like, the parents are over here going, I'm not like locking them in a closet and not talking to them. Like they are here and part of our world. I think we need to be careful that we are missing the fact that this child or these children could be in a really language rich environment and still missing lots of information simply because they're not connected to their environment, because their executive functioning system is not regulating themselves to external information, right? And so as a result, they're going to, look like they may have some breakdowns in development.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes me just think of so many children that I worked with back when I was doing like more of the early intervention stuff. And, it's some of these kids looked, they would get a diagnosis of being on the spectrum and they would have that ASD diagnosis. And a year later, after working with them, it was like, well, they don't look like that anymore. And you're like, well, how about we don't just like throw around diagnoses at age 2? How about we get to know the child first and not just something on a standardized or lack of standardized tests, because at 2, that's super easy to diagnose with standardized tests. Anyways, it's a whole other conversation for another day.
Whole other conversation. Yes.
Yeah. But it's fascinating. And you could just see that these children were not connected with their world. And so maybe that's why they're lining up these toys in a straight line across the classroom, because that's how they know how to play. And that's what makes sense to their system right now. That's what feels good. That's what they know. And that's how they're playing at the moment.
That's how their brain works. Yeah.
And then to see these kids be to get the right intervention and to work with them in a way that teaches them, maybe they need that one-on-one, maybe learning in the classroom setting is not enough for them, or maybe being in a, and that, like you said, being in a language rich environment is great, but not every kid is still going to respond the same way or be able to access it if something else is, if there's a disconnect, and especially in executive functioning. So I think this is a really important conversation, because we talk a lot about these kids who we know are not sleeping well and who sometimes look a little spacey. They might be turned around at circle time. They might not be responding to their name. Like they're, they have splinter skills. Like you're talking about, why do they get this skill, but not that skill? And we're like, their skills are all over the map. There's like no linear like development here that we would expect. Like, and if you're following milestones and whatnot. And I have seen it turn around when a child's sleep changes. Like, let's say that child had enlarged adenoids or tonsils and they had obstructive sleep apnea, because we're seeing that in 3-year-olds. And then they have either the procedure and or whatever is done to address sleep hygiene and proper breathing through your nose and, closed mouth posture and whatnot. We're seeing a complete 180. And these kids, like we're like, who is this child? Like this child went from kind of like staring off into space, like turned around at like, just like you said, disconnected from their environment. And this is a more extreme case, I think. We've got other kids who look like they're playing and they look like they're kind of fitting in. And I feel like these are our kids who always fall through the cracks, because I'm going, yeah, but something is off here, because they're not connecting with their peers, and they're not, they're the kids who are having a hard time following directions, but they can follow directions. So why are they not doing it in the classroom? Or they work really well with an adult or one-on-one, but then you put them in a group setting and it's like, they really struggle, right? It's just.
So then when I see kiddos like that, then I'm starting to wonder if we have difficulties with an executive functioning skill of inhibition. So in order to, and that is one of also the foundational skills. So really our attention, our inhibition, and our working memory, these 3 are like the triad, the foundational triad for our whole executive functioning system. And by which, all the other skills, higher executive functioning skills sort of develop out of these 3. So, inhibition, we really have to be able to say, that's not important right now. This is important. And that's where my focus and attention has to go. And so you have to inhibit something. Now for littles, this is really, really hard, right? This is really hard. And they're not supposed to be able to be great at inhibiting, because if you think about, let's see, Dr. Amishi Jha, she talks about attention. She's a neuroscientist who only studies attention, or primarily studies attention. She talks about attention in terms of being a flashlight versus, like pointed focus, directed focus, as opposed to we have a system of attention that's like a floodlight. We're sort of open and alert to everything. Children they have a broader, more floodlight, like young children, right? Especially our birth to 3 population, but even this can carry on until, 4 or 5. And this is why some of those kindergartners, have very little detail focused attention, because they have that floodlight attention. And the reason that is so important is because for this little brain to be learning everything that it has to learn in such a short period of time in this early development, if they were only focused in on one thing all day long, it would take a long time for them to learn all of the skills that they needed to. So their executive functioning system, their attention system has to be much broader, more like that floodlight, taking everything in. And so that's normal. That's normal development. And then these kids get into kindergarten and everyone's like, they can't pay attention to me. They can't do the worksheet. And everyone's like so upset.
They shouldn't be at that age, but that's also another conversation.
Right. Well, and again, there's a range of development. We know that every kiddo is going to develop differently, and that is normal. And this is a whole other conversation, but I don't like milestones. I don't use milestones. I don't follow milestones. So that's just another conversation. But because, again, they're based off of a 50th percentile child. I've never worked with this 50th percentile child. So none of this data means jack squat to me. So I don't use it. I meet the child where they are.
Yes.
Okay. So anyways, but so we have, this kiddo who has this, from the time they're an infant, they have this floodlight type of attention. And then the older they get, they start to develop the flashlight. They start to develop the flashlight type of attention. Some kids are going to develop the flashlight faster than others. And it's just the way it is. Are there things we can do to support it? Absolutely. Right. We don't want them to be totally derailed, through their development. There are things that we can do to support it, but for sure it's so variable.
Yeah. Going into so many preschool classrooms, just through my own private practice or through infants and toddlers when I worked for them. But then also I've only ever worked with the birth to 5 population in terms of language. I've never worked beyond 5 or so. Maybe I did follow one case with a child. I loved this family. The child had a seizure disorder, and I did work with her a little bit beyond the typical age range that I work with. But so all of my experience in the language world was always with our earliest population. And it drove me a little bonkers to see what they're doing in the schools, which I know we could talk about all day long, but it's what they used to expect in second grade is now first is kindergarten is pre-K. And I'm just some kids might be ready, but most kids are not. And, I'm finding that it's too much for their little brains. I mean, do you have any thought on that? Do you feel
yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of thought on that. Let's see, where's my soapbox and my microphone? Yes, I have a lot of thought of that. Executive functioning for one, right? They're at different peaks. So I'll talk about executive functioning. There's one thing I want to talk about, literacy. Don't let me forget. But executive functioning, right? The kids have their first big peak of development between 4 or 5-ish. Sometimes it goes a little later into 6. Okay. So they really have awful self-regulatory skills until that point. So we're into elementary school at that point. Okay. So we're already expecting them to sit for too long and do a task for too long, right? So there's that. The other aspect is there's a second peak of development that takes place in the executive functioning system, and that's in middle adolescence. And that's usually high school years. Okay. So when do we see kids fall off the cliff in school? I tend to see, because I work with all age ranges, there's a continuous pattern that I've seen for my entire career that when the kids fall off the cliff is when they go into middle school.
I was going to say, is it that elementary to middle school transition?
Usually 5th grade, 6th grade, depending on when the school transfers.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they go to middle school, they're expected to be little adults. Yeah. They're expected to be able to organize their work and plan out really long tasks and execute now for something that might happen a week later.
Trying to get to your classroom in 5 minutes from one building to the next with a whole crowd of people. I mean, it's overwhelming. And then there's so much more responsibility expected as well that I'm they're not ready for all of this.
They're not. And it's not that the executive functioning system stops developing between that 4 or 5 peak and the middle adolescence peak, but it's sort of a slow climb. And so, we're expecting a whole lot from these kids way too early. So there's the executive function component. And then when we talk about literacy, there is one part of the brain, the visual word form area, that it's an area that literally has to be created. So we're not born with it. We're born with every other aspect of processing that we need for literacy, except for this one area. So the brain literally has to create a whole new processing area. And this usually happens anywhere between 6 and 7 years old.
Okay. That's where my daughter is right now.
Yeah. And some kids will develop it sooner and some later, but the average is 6 to 7 years old. So we're asking preschoolers to be doing sight words and to be doing with this. They haven't even developed this part of the brain yet. And so what happens when we put these unrealistic expectations on a little brain, right? Stress. Oh, now we have anxiety and let's medicate them for anxiety. Like, I just can't, right? Like,
what you're saying this, and I'm sitting here going, I feel so much better hearing this from you, even though my daughter's teachers have said to me, these kids come into first grade, and mind you, she was homeschooled last year because our schools were mostly shut down with COVID. So here we are in new school this past August. I was like, let's move down early before, we're ready to move, because I want them to start where they're going to end the school year. And I want them to make friends, and I want them just to feel, I don't want the added stress on them. And everyone's like, oh, they'll be fine. Just go do what's more convenient for you. And I'm like, I'd rather inconvenience myself as the mother and the adult, because I have that ability to do it this way. And allow them to get comfortable versus popping into a new school 2 months before the school year ends, which would have been the original plan if we waited till our house was done. So here we are, new school, and I'm stressed out because I'm girlfriend keeps forgetting to bring her math homework home. And that's just not an area we focused on a lot last year in homeschool. My husband's supposed to do it. He didn't really do it. So we ended up getting her a math tutor, because I'm someone else can help beef up this practice. I don't understand how they're teaching math these days, and I don't really have time to learn. So I'm going to, a teacher from the school who wants to earn some extra cash, she can come tutor Lily. It'll be great for all of us.
I have a Lily too. Okay. Sorry, I have a Lily. All right.
Yay. So, anyways, she's done fabulous, and just that one-on-one attention really helped, but she also just had a lot of gaps to close. But it was interesting because I was talking to the teachers, and they basically were don't worry about forgotten homework in terms, we don't check it for accuracy. We're just checking to see they turned it in. And even if they don't turn it in, we're not going to count it against them. It's very common during the first, first 50% of first grade that things are going to get forgotten. They really need a lot of reminders from us. And I was I'm so glad that you guys would expect them to be little adults yet. And, and they said, usually come January, February, you'll notice that they'll start to remember to do a lot of these things themselves. And we kind of back off on the reminders. And I'm over here going, it's May, and Lily's still forgetting her stuff. So I just feel so much better now that you said she's still in that transition period.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, this is kind of off topic, but you bring up the concept of homework. All the research shows that there are no benefits to homework in the early years. We start to see benefits to homework when the kids are in late middle school and high school. That's when we start to see, from a neuroscience, the researchers doing the research is showing that. So when our educational system will catch up, I don't know. But.
Yeah. I think up north, the homework was heavier. I think down here, it's more so just read for 15 minutes. And she went from, and so it's encouraging her to read on her own, which I'm that's great. It's not sit down and do 5 hours of homework. And then the math for us, I think there's plenty of people who don't do it, and I don't think it gets counted against the kids. So I think it's kind of just do what you can. But for us, it was we need to figure out where the gaps are in her skills. So it helped us a little bit. I am totally with you on the no homework camp, because I'm when they come home after sitting all day, I can see it in her. She doesn't want to do it. She wants to play. She wants to relax. She wants to decompress. Some days we go to dance, some days, it's they don't need to be continuing to work their brains. They need to be using their skills in a different way and being more creative.
And the other thing that's so important here is that, again, the information that was learned during the day, we know that what gets that information solidified, right, is sleep, but it is also the downtime. So, you know, some of the researchers talk about going for a walk, doing, you know, playing something, and then the brain will sort of run through very subconsciously, right? But the brain rehearses and stores the information and makes associations. And so if we're constantly plugging away, giving them new stimulus after new stimulus after new, like they're just having to work and keep their working memory going constantly, it never gives the brain this downtime to just rehearse. And plus these little ones, they have to play. I mean, we know that that's how their brain learns best. And that is so important. And then, you know, meeting their sensory needs, you know, they've got to get home and do all those things, jumping around, running outside, rolling, whatever it is, to meet all the sensory needs that they couldn't get met during the day.
Yeah, so that was okay. I made a couple purchases during COVID when we were home. It was like one of those jumperoo. It's like that inflated tire looking thing at the bottom. It has like the poles that come up and loop over in like 3 different ways. It has a little swingy thing in the middle, and we put it in our basement and they loved it. We put like little balls from a ball pit down in the middle of it on the bottom. So it was like very versatile. And then more recently, even though like things are not closed down here in Florida, I saw a friend up north had bought this like air track for her daughter, I guess, because
oh yeah, those are cool.
So of course I was like, well, both my kids are going to fight over this. So I bought one that was like double long. So it takes up like 2 freaking rooms. It's like insane. They love it. And they're not even gymnasts, like, but they need to bounce. And I'm like, it keeps them from bouncing on the furniture. It gets them moving. Like we can go for a walk and tire them out outside, but it's just like having these different things because it deflates and you can just put it away. I'm like, it's so important. And I don't think that a lot of children, one, get the opportunity to do these things, unfortunately. And 2, like you said, it's, you know, they need to play. When I was in kindergarten, there were no desks. We maybe had a half moon table that you might have gone and sat at for like snack time or something. And other than that, it was all open with floor play and toys. And like, we've gotten so far away from that. And I know we could go on this tangent forever, but I'm just like, it breaks my heart that 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds are sitting at a desk for 6.5 hours a day. And that's why I homeschooled Lily last year, because I was like, all right, it's enough that you're sitting at a desk in person and you can have human interaction. I was like, but to sit on Zoom for 23 hours a week.
Yeah, that was hard.
Kindergarten, I was like, I know too much. This not, I mean, she wouldn't have done it anyways, because she's just like, after 30 minutes, she's like, this is boring. And she started like, her seat. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. So I mean, I homeschooled her.
Too, I feel like at large in our education system, we've lost sight of the big picture, right? That like their grades, the grades that they get in elementary school, they don't matter.
No.
The grades they get in elementary school are not going to predict what college they go. They have no boundary, you know.
Yeah.
They're not related.
Yeah.
The way that even in middle school, unless you're trying to do a really elite high school, right? That's a little bit different. Then the grades do matter, but the grades don't matter. The way that I always, you know, when I work with our families in our private practice, you know, I say when they're little, elementary school, we're learning how to learn.
Yeah.
And then when we get to middle school, we're learning how to get good grades. So that means we're learning our study skills. We're starting to learn how to self-regulate a little bit better, keep ourselves organized and self-monitoring and self-correcting and planning, all of those really good executive functioning skills, right? So, you know, we're learning time management, pacing ourselves, all of that. So we're learning that in middle school so that when we get to high school, we're ready to get good grades. Mm-hmm. Instead of like pushing this down to these little, because I feel like we miss this big picture.
Of like, the 4-year-olds act like they're in 10th grade. I mean, it's normal, right?
No, and it's not working. Like it's not working.
Yeah.
The United States has what?
It's a mess.
Yeah. We have for a developed country, we have the highest college dropout rate.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, there's a really fascinating book called Age of Opportunity by Steinberg. I think every parent and educator, or anybody who touches children and, you know, not touches, don't touch them. You know what I mean? That gets creepy. What just happened there? Oh my God. Okay. You can totally keep that in, but I just somehow creeped out this whole conversation. But anyways, you know, that reaches children. Okay.
Yeah.
But this book is so phenomenal, Lauren Steinberg, Age of Opportunity, and it's about the neuroscience behind adolescence, but really it's very much about all aspects of development. And I think it'd be really handy even for young, parents of young children to read it. But he talks about that. He talks about why is it that we have the most resources in this country, pretty much in the world. There might be other countries that have a little bit more, but we're in the top there for sure in terms of resources. Yet we have one of the highest college dropout rates. And a lot of these factors that we're talking about right now contribute to that.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I mean, aside from financial, reasons, I would definitely believe that it has a lot. I mean, I experienced it my first year in college too. I literally went from being like an A student with a GPA over 4.0 to having taken some like college level courses as a senior in high school from like this new program that they were beta testing with the local, community college, and went to a great college. I went to University of Maryland, and it's a great program. And here I'm in my business classes and I'm getting C's on tests. And I'm like, what just happened? Like, I'm studying the same way I always have, which clearly was not going to cut it for what was required in college. But I think, and so some people are like, well, you probably just have test anxiety. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe I do, but that doesn't help me. Like, how do I fix it? Like, what do I do to change this? I'm like, I don't feel anxious before a test. Like when and so the fun part too is I remember taking my GREs, because at that point I was on Ritalin, and they give you all these supports. Well, one of them is like headphones, right? And you're taking the test on a computer. And so they give me the headphones. So because I'm very highly distractible, and talk about being highly distractible. Talk about being highly distractible. I can hear my own heart beating and I could not think, because through the headphones I'm hearing is like boom, 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 boom. I'm like, oh,
bone conduction now, right? As soon as you put the headphones on, now you've got the sound rattling around. Yeah.
Taking the medicine, wearing the headphones. I'm like, I can't do this. Like I took the headphones off, and like it was less distracting for me to hear other people's like keys clicking than it was for me to hear my own heartbeat. And people are like, oh, it's so quiet, you can't hear a pin drop. I'm like, I can hear a pin drop.
You're like, yes.
We're all the pin drops.
Yeah. My teenagers will never be able to sneak out of the house, because one step and sisters, I am on you like a fly on shit. I'm like, I hear everything.
My daughter's always like, you heard that? I'm like, oh, I hear and see everything. I'm like, I do what my mom used to say. My mom used to be like, I've got eyes behind my head. Like I will see everything you do. So now I tell Lily that, and she's like, how did you know? I was like, I told you, I warned you, I know everything. And she was like, I was like, yeah, watch out, kid, watch out.
Ears in all directions.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but it's really interesting, because going back to Steinberg's book, he talks about the reason why, what he talks about is, and what the research is showing is that the lack of self-determination and resiliency are the two biggest reasons for why we have these young adults who are struggling. And he says we can set them up with all the education, but if we don't help them work on being able to self-direct for future goals, then they're going to be struggling. And that is executive functioning.
I've seen
executive functioning is self-directing for something that hasn't happened yet. There's more to it. There's also self-reflection, so we can reflect on what's happened in the past. So all of that is part of the executive functioning system. But we're not really working on these skills. And when I work with teachers and school districts, that's something I try to show them is you can take your curriculum that you have right now, but let's structure it in a little bit of a different way, so that now we're showing them, okay, here's a goal that we see further ahead. How can we plan for that now to set ourselves up for success later, right? Yeah. So much that we can do. Now.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think about a few people that I know where it's like they couldn't even get to class. Like they couldn't get themselves to class. And you talk about like, determination. Well, and then I've been in other business arenas and everything where we talk a lot about determination and resiliency and all these things. And it's, we don't have, some people are very internally determined, and like, it doesn't matter what you do, like, it doesn't matter what they struggle with, they are going to get there, they're going to do it, but that's not the majority of people. That's, I think it's a much smaller, like, that's me. I don't care if I'm failing. I don't care, like, unless I am sick and stuck in bed, like, if I committed to being somewhere, like, I am going to be there. At least that's how it used to be. Now I try to get out of everything as an adult, but in college, I was like, I have to go to class. What do you mean I can't go to class? I'll be in trouble if I don't go to class. Like, in trouble with who? Like, right. But that was basically what I told myself, and that was my belief system that I think also kept me kind of plugging along, even though it was hard and I was struggling. And I don't think anybody really knew that I was struggling other than myself and my mother, my family. But I think it's a very interesting conversation, because it takes everything, just from getting up in the morning to going to the class, to doing, assignments or readings or whatever, to participating in the class, to paying attention while you're sitting in class. I mean, it's hard. There's a lot to just get access to that information.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's important to remember that our executive functioning, so all of those skills, all those things that you just mentioned, all fall under, become issues that the executive functioning system has to regulate. So it's all part of that system. And when we wake up in the morning, we have a finite capacity to do that. Right. And so some people are going to have a really big glass, and some people may start with half a glass of executive functioning control capacity. And some may start with a tiny little bit at the bottom of the glass, right? So not everybody's starting off with the same amount of executive functioning capacity. So that's one really important point. Another really important point is that some people are going to deplete their capacity faster.
Yeah.
Right. And so some children, they're going to deplete their executive functioning control by the time they get to school. The whole morning routine of just getting up, getting ready, and getting out the door, and making sure everything's organized, and getting to school. By the time they get to school, they've got nothing left, right?
Yeah.
So, it's why I always say it's why I like by the end of the week in particular, like on a Friday.
Yeah.
And who wants to cook on a Friday? Nobody wants to cook dinner on a Friday. So it's always like the night, we'll go out to dinner because it's Friday. Nobody wants to cook. And so my husband will say, where do you want to go for dinner? And I look at him and I'm like, how dare you ask me a question? How?
Me too.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
all the other decisions this week. Why are you asking me this? Can't you make a decision for once?
Audacity. The audacity to ask me a question on a Friday night. How dare you? That's grounds for dinner. No, I'm just kidding. I love him. But the reason why is because we have literally depleted our capacity. And guess what? Decision-making is the highest level executive functioning skill. What the brain has to do in order to just make a decision, we have to hold all kinds of information in our mind and associate it and compare it, and then decide, prioritize which one makes the most sense. That takes a lot of working memory. That takes a lot of executive function control. And on Friday night, you better damn believe it, I got none left. So maybe we set a plan where like Monday morning, we decide where we're going to dinner on Fridays. That might be the better answer to this. We just solved the world's problems. Good night, everybody. Yeah.
No, it's my mom will, she's with us right now, and she'll say things like, well, what do you guys want for dinner? And she'll start asking us at like 3 p.m. because she knows that nobody's going to give her an answer. And then at 6 o'clock, we're like, so where are we ordering from? Because at this point, no, done. And like, it's just, but it's kind of the running joke in this house. And I will say to, like, they'll ask me, Hallie, what do you want to eat? Because I'm like, I'm gluten-free and I don't eat fried food. And I'm a little bit pickier in what I eat. And so, I'm like, I don't care tonight. I don't have the capacity. This is always what I say. I do not have the capacity to decide where I'm going to eat. I just need to nourish my body. So y'all decide, because I'll find something wherever you pick. Like, I can't. I mean, this is like literally like it happens several times a week that we have this.
And now you can say, I don't have the executive functioning capacity. Yep. And now you sound really smart, and everybody will listen to that.
Right? It's my ADHD. And I was just told I don't have the executive functioning capacity. And then they'll be like, oh, okay. And then they'll get it. Because I just blame things on my ADHD.
You do have it. You do have it. You've just depleted it, right? You've just tapped
I
out.
love how, like you talked about the glass full, glass half full, because I use this in feeding therapy a lot, where I tell people, like, if we have 10 buckets, right? And we walk into, the therapy room or into a mealtime with, let's say we don't even have our 10 buckets starting because of these 3 other things that happened prior to that meal, right? We're starting with 7. And now you put a food on the table that is going to be noxious to that child. It is going to make them like want to gag, or they're going to have some kind of a sensory response, even though it's not in front of them, it's on somebody else's plate. We've just lost a bucket. And then you ask this child, what do you want to eat? And even if it's served family style and they get to pick it, themselves, now they have to, there goes another bucket. Now they have to make a choice about what they're going to put on their plate and how much, and then I'm like, you see how we quickly go from like 10 buckets that we have for our entire day, and how a mealtime might like one single mealtime might take up a whole bunch of those buckets. That's where I love these kind of analogies, because I feel like
of spoon theory.
Yes,
spoons,
exactly.
Have you seen that? Like, how many spoons do we have? Yeah. Very
yeah.
I love that.
And that's where I think when we start to explain this to people, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, the battery has run out. We have to recharge the battery, but how do you recharge a battery in the middle of the day or in the middle of mealtime when you're, I'm like, well, you just do, or you make changes so that those buckets of energy, those spoons, that glass of water lasts longer throughout the day, because we've been very intentional with this, what we're putting in place to allow for that. Right. And so that's, it's
we can do that in the same way. So when I hear that, we can do that in the same way with the child's executive functioning within the school day, right? There are ways that we can set them up for success and not drain their executive functioning glass, right? Just immediately at the end of the day. We can help them chunk and plan information. We can be really mindful of this, what looks like a really simple worksheet, right? That you're going to put in front of a kiddo. Let's say the child has to flip back and forth. The answers are on the back. So like the word key, the word bank is on the back, yet the questions are on the front. And so the child has to look for the word.
That drives me crazy.
Right. And that's an issue with working memory. So that takes a lot of working memory capacity to be able to remember the question when you flip over and compare it and look for the answer, and then remember the answer and flip it back over and remember where to find. So, right, that's something that will drain a child's executive functioning really quickly. That's simple to fix. Side by side papers, right? So that they have them both there, and it's going to support their working memory. There's so many little things, like that we can do to support them, but we have to be mindful of it. And we just have to know, right? A lot of people, a lot of teachers, a lot of therapists just
don't know,
aware of that, and then how to support it.
Yeah. So I know you have your book, and where can everybody find you? Because I know, like, from a resource standpoint, if someone says, okay, I want to learn more about executive functioning, or I think I have my child, or even I have something going on, like, where can they find you? How do they get your book? Share that with us.
Okay, 4 really great places. I know that sounds a lot. Oh my gosh. Okay, the first one, my private practice, which, so we're pretty full, but that's okay. And obviously, certification always becomes an issue there too. But if families want to look out for this, so seedsoflearning.com, seedsoflearningllc.com. Sorry. Second one, my book is on Amazon. So it's called The Seeds of Learning. It's a cognitive processing model for speech, language, and literacy. And really what I did there was I was trying to put a holistic approach together so that everybody can see how these different pieces and parts work together. How does executive functioning impact language? How does language impact literacy? How, all of this. So that's The Seeds of Learning on Amazon. And then Instagram, I'm constantly posting free education on Instagram. So that's an easy one and done source. And I post almost every day. And then what's
your handle? Tell us your handle on Instagram.
At Tera Sumpter _SLP. Thank you. You mean you can read my mind? Okay, yeah. And the last one, so I have an educational community. It's an online educational community specifically for executive functioning. So we work on, there's self-study material, there's weekly live Zooms, we have 50+ hours of saved recordings in the community. And then we have resource libraries packed with information. Lots and lots of resources, assessment, treatment information. And I don't know the website off the top of my head.
That's okay. You can send it to me and I'll put it in the notes for you. Is that geared towards like SLPs? Is that geared towards parents? Who is that for?
Okay, so that is geared towards SLPs. However, we have a lot of parents in there who ask to be in there and are saying that they're finding so much value in it. We also have school psychologists, occupational therapists, but it's all geared towards executive functioning, assessment, and then intervention. And so people are always like, just tell me how to do the intervention. That's where you go for the therapy. If you want the therapy, it's there. And that's what my second book is going to be on, but I can't get the book done quickly. So I created the community. So that's a really fantastic resource with people from all over the world. And they're, so these SLPs and parents are constantly communicating. We've got an SLP from Portugal and China and Australia, Ireland, from all over, and they're all communicating. And it is so freaking cool. Yeah. Like how an SLP does their job in Portugal, I'm like, this is so cool.
I've learned a lot from like feeding therapy and Myo and stuff in like other, because of my online programs and having all these different people who I never would have reached, like in Australia. And, it's just, it's very cool to be able to interact with other people in our industry. So I totally get that.
It's been such a joy. Yeah.
This has been amazing. Is there any last things you want to share with us before we start to wrap up?
I don't think so. I guess if I had one nugget that I had to leave everybody with, it would be that executive functioning is the foundation for all later learning. And so when we're seeing children who are struggling to acquire, certain aspects of speech language literacy development in particular, really maybe there's something going on right within that executive functioning system.
I love that. Thank you. This has been so fantastic.
Thanks for joining. I know. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad that we finally got this to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you want to hear more of these Myo, TOTS, airway, and feeding related episodes, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or pledge a small amount on patreon.com/the Untethered Podcast. If you found value, others in this space will too. So be sure to share this episode on your social media platforms and join us over on Facebook, on my Facebook page at Hallie Bulkin Biz, on Instagram at Hallie Bulkin, and you can head over to theuntetheredpodcast.com to grab a copy of the show notes, where you can also subscribe to be kept up to date on the latest podcast episodes.